Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start out with an observation myself. I have not observed a reluctance toward climate alarmism. I think it's readily available and out there. I've actually got a couple pages of just dire predictions that just never came true, which is kind of a problem for climate alarmists. They've been alarming people for decades, whether it's global cooling, global warming, sea level rise, taking over cities. It hasn't panned out. That being said, again, I don't deny climate change. It always has, always will change. Don't deny the impact you're talking about on the oceans. I'm concerned about the same thing. I hate to see the destruction of coral reefs, the disruption of fisheries, that type of thing. My point, my question is, what can we realistically do about it? Again, in testimony, we heard that we've spent about $5 trillion so far combating climate change. Also heard in testimony from the majority witnesses when I asked, does anybody really think that India and China are going to stop burning fossil fuels? Not only do they say, no, that's not going to happen, neither will we. So that's just the reality of the situation. I would say it's actually immoral to ask less developed countries not to power their populations out of poverty. I guess we can sit back here and go, yeah, we can afford, a 25, 30, 50% increase in power to, move toward green energy. People impoverished in China and in India can't, and they won't. So my point always is, what can we honestly do about it? Dr. Levy, you're the economist here. Do you think it's a moral thing to do to impose green energy on China and India? And by the way, do you think it's even possible?
Could you put your mic on, sir?
Yes, sorry about that. I said we would be in a difficult situation if we're turning to economists for moral guidance, but I think you raise a very good point, which is that when you have global problems, if we're looking at the efficacy, it's going to differ dramatically whether we're able to do global solutions or local solutions, which may then get overwhelmed. And I would say the degree of cooperation on these issues with emerging countries has not been especially high. It's high when it comes to making pledges for the distant future, less so when it comes to implementing measures. And I think that is a serious concern.
Again, I remain a skeptic in terms of the total impact. But again, it sounds like this panel's pretty solid with that, so I don't want to argue the point. I will point out somebody like Bjorn Lomborg, who I think is on your side in terms of man-made climate change, also says that we shouldn't spend a dime on it because with limited resources, and we have limited resources, there are far more effective ways to alleviate human suffering. And we should focus on that. And Dr. Fraser, that kind of sounds like your approach to this thing is, okay, what can we actually do? Why don't you speak to that issue?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to, again, preface my response in a couple of ways, right? I think that everybody on this panel would recognize that, as I said before in my testimony, that climate change is real and, it's a concern with a lot of potential impacts. But we're seeing real effects now. And so, and it's important to figure out how we're going to spend our limited resources. I'm a scientist, not a policymaker or an appropriator, right? But I do recognize that our resources are limited and they're difficult decisions to make. And so what I'd like to do in my profession is to provide credible information that allows people like yourselves to make informed decisions about should we invest in, a higher bridge, a higher road, an improved water conveyance system or stormwater systems so that we better protect the livelihoods of people in my state, for example, in Florida, right? But at the end of the day, if we don't address the issue of increasing emissions, we will continue to deal and grapple with increased temperatures both in the atmosphere and in the ocean, which will, make it more difficult with time. But again, I appreciate and recognize that resources are limited, right? And hopefully we can provide you the best information possible to spend those resources in a wise manner.
Okay, and we're not in a position to bend China and India to our will.
So again, what I would say in that regard, it's a global problem, right? And I think that it's all of our responsibility as a society to work to a common solution.
Thank you.